that they deserve about what has gone so horrifically wrong in their cases, whether that's the trauma of the grief they're living with as a result of bereavement and the avoidable harm and loss that their children have suffered, and indeed the physical harm and injury that has been caused to mothers, the pain that fathers and partners are going through as well. I don't mind saying this has taken too long.
What are you going to say to the Prime Minister, Health Secretary?
Are you going to stand for leader?
Morning, sir. Are you going to challenge the Prime Minister? Is that
Are you going to challenge the Prime Minister?
Hello?
Have you resigned, Mr. Streeting?
What did you say, Mr. Streeting?
Did you ask the Prime Minister to resign?
Are you going to resign, Mr. Streeting?
Do you want the job or not?
And that simple failure to listen to women, to respect women, is how we end up with tragic cases like Jessica Brady, who died from cancer after her condition was missed or dismissed, despite more than 20 appointments at her GP practice. We introduced Jess's rule in her memory so that GP teams now have to reflect, review and rethink if a patient presents 3 times with the same or escalating symptoms, something that will benefit all of us, but I think will disproportionately benefit women. We've also stood up a rapid investigation into maternity services led by Baroness Amos that's already heard from 8,000 people and will report in the next couple of months. The Maternity and Neonatal Task Force that I'm chairing is already up and running and standing by to implement her final recommendations when we have them. And I'm pleased to say that gynaecology waiting lists are now falling for the first time in years, and we're putting in even more money to tackle the backlog of cases. But as I've just said on Women's Hour this morning, when I look at the rise in waiting lists overall, it doesn't explain the disproportionate rise in the gynaecology waiting list.
Well, I think it's very bad for the country that we're seeing all this chaos and introspection within the Labour Party. I think whatever happens, whether it's the Prime Minister surviving or somebody else taking over, unfortunately we can't get away from a couple of inconvenient facts. One is that this government has absolutely no plan, particularly on how to deal with the economy, and I don't see that changing going forward. And the second thing is that we've seen complete disarray amongst Labour backbenchers and a party in Parliament that's incapable of taking the kind of tough decisions like getting on top of the welfare bill, getting people back to work that are required if we're to get into a better place.
We might be seeing a leadership challenge soon. There are a few names being thrown around. Of course, we've got Streeting, particularly this morning, Rayner, Burnham and potentially Ed Miliband. Who would be your front runner?
Well, these are matters for the Labour Party internally, but what we can't get away from is we're in a period of absolute chaos when our country is facing into some of the biggest challenges that it's faced in many years, a war in the Middle East, spiking oil prices, inflationary pressures, and yet we've got all of this noises off going on in government. And we really need to get this settled down now, and it's down to the Prime Minister to try and do that. But at the moment he's shown himself as somebody who's really weak and no backbone and no authority, I'm afraid. Any economic growth, of course, is welcome. The ONS who produced these figures have also pointed out that some of this may be due to the rather depressed spending at the tail end of last year as a direct reaction to the mismanagement of the run-up to the budget, where the government was floating all sorts of possible taxes which depressed confidence and spending. So we may have been just seeing a shift of growth in that sense. But we can't get away from the fact that if you look at the picture overall, growth in our country has been far too sluggish. The IMF, for example, have downgraded their growth forecast for this year, actually halving the rate of growth that they're expecting. I think the concern is the immediate impact on the markets and gilt yields in particular, and that's about the cost of government borrowing. We've got very high levels of debt in our country that this government is adding to, and also the kind of costs that people up and down the country are facing through their mortgages and businesses in terms of the cost of borrowing. So these are damaging effects of the kind of chaos that we're seeing within the Labour Party at the moment that people are bearing the direct cost of in their day-to-day lives.
Do you think that Starmer should go?
Well, I think for some time the view of my party has been that this Prime Minister has not been performing, that he's not doing the right things for the country. It appears he's now lost complete control even of his own government. But it's hard to see what kind of alternative is going to suddenly magically change this kind of dysfunction right at the heart of government in our country. But clearly he's not up to the job.
For the Conservatives, the other options, as I said, Miliband, Streeting, Rayner, would they be better or worse for the Conservatives?
I think anybody running the parliamentary party that Labour have at the moment is going to be in a very similar position to the Prime Minister. If there is a change, they'll inherit a very divided Labour Party in Parliament, a party in Parliament that's already demonstrated it can't take the tough decisions to, for example, get on top of the welfare bill, get people off benefits and into work, and a party that has shown it has no plan, particularly on the economy. And I don't see any of that changing, I'm afraid, even if they change leader.
Anything else?
Because it's just as well the people of Scotland have John Swinney as First Minister and the SNP as the Scottish Government to stand as the buttress of fairness and justice between them and the remote and unaccountable UK Government here in Westminster. Not just remote and unaccountable, but dysfunctional to an alarming degree. And that dysfunction is what has precipitated this most vapid of King's speeches. If somebody who was unaware of the UK malaise, unaware of the economic crises multiple that affect the United Kingdom just now, and they saw the government's solution in the form of this King's speech, they would be unable to identify what the problem with the UK was.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In 2024, the public voted for change, for an end to Tory chaos, and for a government that would transform their lives. That summer, our government set out a King's speech to deliver that, and in the past 2 years, in spite of everything, we have begun to make truly transformational changes, like ending no-fault evictions and finally scrapping the two-child benefit cap, things that have changed lives.
And for however difficult it may be for many on these benches to admit, it is now clear to me that this Prime Minister can no longer provide that hope. I do not say it with pleasure, but leadership is not only about knowing when to fight on, it is also about knowing when your authority has ebbed, when trust has frayed, and when it is time to leave the stage.